I'm talking during the session, so we don't leave.
Blake?
Oh,
Here we
there you go.
Hello, you guys. Back again at Houston Social Media Day, and I have Juan with me from Big Oak Tree Media. He is one part of that great company, and I have to tell you guys, from a nonprofit standpoint, I think this was probably the most informative thing I sat through. So we talked. Thank you. We talked about PR, and I just wanted to go over a few of the things that you talked about that were so huge. And you talked about having a strategy and having a goal. So can you just touch briefly about how important that goal and that strategy is to the PR?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about, like I said earlier, I think at the end of the day, social media and public relations work hand in hand. So it's really about reputation management. And I think the example I used was to think about it as an umbrella. The reputation management is the umbrella, and under that lives social media and lives public relations, and they both kind of go hand in hand. With a lot of other things like internal communications and other public affairs and other aspects. But I think that's an easy way to think about it, is to just think about it as both being part of one and the same. And at the end of the day, you're thinking about your reputation,
right,
and that's what's at stake here. And it's also about the human connection and how that reputation is going to affect that human connection.
I drew the umbrella. It was pretty good.
Thank you.
I think the thing that really hit me the hardest was the playbook, or the in case you get hit by a bus.
Yes.
Book, that the guidelines there.
Yep.
So why do you have to have that? Because I mean, I'm always going to be in my position, right?
I mean, we never know whether we're always going to be in our position, because it could be that you get promoted, it could be that you find a better place to go, or it could be that your job just kind of changes and you have more responsibilities and you're no longer responsible, or you're training somebody to kind of be in that position as well. Or even if you just go on vacation, you need somebody that's going to be able to come in and support your social media so that it looks seamless, and the people on the other end can't tell, like, oh, Katie's on vacation this week because the social media is different this week.
So I could just write this once and be done with it and walk away, right?
No, it's a living document. It's a living document because, as we know, social media changes so often, so frequently. There's so many different platforms, so many things happening at the same time, always. So it's always going to be a living document that moves and shifts and changes, and maybe your organization goes through a rebrand, and that means that you have to go, think about how that applies and affects.
We're going through that right now.
Oh yeah,
it's huge.
Yeah,
it's huge. So you talked about a couple other things that I thought were huge that I wanted to pull out, and one was that your brand needs to have a personality, and to really fight for that personality, and that PR is that you can just really work that through there. So how do you give your brand a personality?
You think about it as if your brand was a human being, what would be the characteristics of that human being? And a lot of times when there's so many layers of approvals, especially when you're talking about things like legal and brand affinity, things like that, it can feel a little bit convoluted, and it starts weighing down on you, and you're like, oh, well, maybe I just need to go with this very corporate version of my brand. But I would encourage you to fight for your personality, as Sandra said. Because that's really going to make a big difference, and it's really going to connect you better with your audience.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were a couple suggestions that you had given. You gave us some examples. One was about the tweets from Adidas.
Yeah.
And it wasn't meant to be harmful.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be.
No. So you can accidentally tweet something with good intention, and it just blows up. So what can we do to avoid that?
It really is, like I said, having those checks and balances of layers of approvals, layers of proofreading, layers of thinking about that public relations perspective, and thinking about your reputation, that are really going to say, does this make sense, even though you're writing something. And I think a lot of times when you're writing about something that's trending, it's easy to want to jump in and want to say something. But when you're doing that, does it really make sense? And is what you're saying potentially a risk? So really evaluating the risk level of the content that you're putting out, I think, is a good way to think about it.
There's never too many eyes on something.
Yeah, never.
And then I think this is probably my very favorite thing. It's important to tell our story. We have to tell our story. But you talked about giving that behind-the-scenes look. I work for a nonprofit. That's all I do, is I give the behind-the-scenes look. So telling your story and giving the behind-the-scenes look, I know why that's important, but why would somebody else think that's important? I mean, what if they're not in a nonprofit? What if they're in a really, really corporate setting? Why do they want to tell their story behind the scenes? And
I think that's precisely because you're not in that, because the people that are watching your content are not in that environment day to day. They don't see that every day, so to them it's something brand new. To them it's something interesting. To them it's something maybe even exclusive that they're getting a behind the scenes look at the things that you're sharing. So you know, a lot of times, like I work in media, so I'm at TV stations several days a week with clients, and I'm doing stories. But when I share content, like, and I show people, like, oh, look, I'm at Fox 26, and I'm behind the scenes, this is how the recording works, people really like to see that because they feel like they're getting access to something that they wouldn't normally get access to. So I mean, think about it that way, and don't get boxed into thinking like, oh, my brand is boring, because every brand has something interesting to share.
Everybody's story is important.
Yes.
That's awesome. And that exclusivity, I can't even say it right now, that whole exclusive background, or look into something, people like to think they're getting something that nobody else is getting.
It's the same thing like networking when you go to a VIP event, like you feel special. So,
they like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
So think about it as a VIP access that you're giving.
Awesome. So again, this is Big Oak Tree Media, and thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Such valuable information. And in your challenge, when she asked you to put it in the millennial bubble there, you stepped up and hit it out of the park. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. The camera.
So I have